Hello and welcome back to Maths Math Tutorials. Today we are going to be continuing our whole derivative basics things or calculus basics, where we kind of go over some stuff that you might forget and want to look back on when the next school year starts. So today we have two very important concepts, the product rule and the quotient rule. And so these are basically ways of saying if you have, a function which is like, uh, you know, sine x times cosine x, and you want to find the derivative of this whole thing, how can you do that? Because it turns out you can't just do derivative of sine x times derivative of cosine x. It's a bit more complicated. And the quotient rule is kind of the same thing, but if you have, sine x over cosine x. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. The formulas, so the product rule is, so d dx of f of x times g of x equals the derivative of f of x times g of x plus the derivative of g of x, right, g prime, times f of x. So first thing to notice here is that does this make sense? Well, if we have multiplication, we could have f of x here and g of x here, or we could switch them, right? We could switch f of x, g of x, and it should be the same. And it seems like here, if we switch them, they will be the same, right? Because we have derivative times non-derivative, derivative times non-derivative, and it doesn't matter. We can flip that. So how do we go about using this? Let's do an example problem. So let's do that problem that I had earlier, which is sine x times cosine x. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to go through deriving this formula because one, you don't care, two, I don't care, three, I don't know how. So sine x times cosine x. So what's the derivative? So we're going to say f of x equals sine x, and we'll say g of x equals cosine x. So what four things we need? We need derivative of f. Okay, so what's the derivative of sine? Sine goes to cosine. So, and that's from last video. Um, if you want to see that, how that works. You basically just memorize it though, to be honest with you. Okay, so and we need g of x, which we already have. And then we need g prime. Cosine goes to negative sine. G prime of x is negative sine x. And then we need f, which we already have. Okay, so now we're ready. So we can just do this times this. So cosine x times cosine x plus this times this, right? So which would be sine x times negative sine x. So sine x times negative sine x. Simplifying this, cosine squared x minus sine squared x. And this is actually our derivative. So it's that simple. There might be ways you can rewrite this using like the cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, but I think this is good enough. You kind of get the idea. So, I mean, honestly, it's kind of just that simple. Let me do, and then of course you could use like product rule or what's it called, chain rule and stuff. Like throughout this, it can kind of get more complicated, but this is the basic formula for it, and it's pretty simple. Now, quotient rule is different. So what if we want the derivative of f of x over g of x? Now this one, realize, should not be symmetrical like this one. It should matter which one's f and which one's g, because of course, 5 over 7 is not the same as 7 over 5, even though 5 times 7 is the same as 7 times 5. So the formula for this is the derivative of the top, right, f prime of x, times the derivative of the bottom, or no, times the bottom, minus the derivative of the bottom times the top, all over the bottom squared. So g of x squared. Now this might seem like kind of a weird formula, but you can actually get this formula from this product rule formula. Because if you kind of think about, you could say f of x over g of x is the same thing as just f of x times g of x to the negative 1. And then it becomes a product rule, but instead of g of x, you kind of have this whole thing. I'm not going to go through all that because I'm going to leave that as a exercise for the viewer. It's not that hard. I think you can do it. It does involve a little bit of a chain rule, though. But, so we're going to use this formula, kind of like we did with the other example, to do sine x over cosine x, also known as tangent of x. So if you remember the last video, I didn't do the derivative of tangent x because it kind of involves this more complicated process, but now we actually have the tools to figure it out. So f of x equals sine x, and g of x equals cosine x. So now what do we need? Same thing as the other one. We're going to need f prime, we're going to need g, which we already have, we're going to need g prime, and we're going to need f, which we already have. Then we're going to need just g squared. But of course, that's basically just g. So we need the derivative of both of these. So of course, again, uh, f prime of x equals cosine x, and g prime of x equals negative sine x. So now we can just plug these things into the formula. So f prime times g, I'm going to shorten this, should be pretty obvious still though, minus g prime times f, so minus g prime times f. So that would be negative sine squared x all over the denominator squared. So the denominator here is cosine, so that would be cosine squared x. So now see that this is equal to, of course, just cosine squared x plus sine squared x over cosine squared x. Now there's a few ways you can go about simplifying it from here. Let me just make this look a bit nicer. For one, you can split into two separate fractions, kind of like this, and then you would have 1, and then you would have tangent squared, and then you could use an identity to simplify that. But I'm just going to say cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1, so this all equals 1 over cosine squared x, which equals, of course, secant squared x. So the derivative of tangent is equal to secant squared. Oh. All right, so pretty simple, two pretty simple examples. This is a shorter video, but I think these two concepts are very important. So if you have any questions, definitely leave those in the comments. Um, do you want to see maybe go through a more complicated example that involves maybe chain rule and some other stuff? But I mean, the point of these videos is not to teach this stuff from scratch. It's kind of just to like jog your memory, right? And maybe just seeing these formulas is enough, you know? F prime times g, g prime times f prime times g minus g prime times f over g squared. You know, it should be enough to jog your memory, because if you are about to take calculus again, or you know some next level of math that's past calculus, and you don't even know what these are like at all, that I can't help that. At least not in this video. That's not the point. So thank you for watching. If you are still confused by product rule and quotient rule, then ask me some questions in the comments next time. Um, I don't know. I might have to look at my calculus textbook. Well, let's see. What kind of other stuff do we have? Uh, let's see. Differentiation, chain rule. Oh, implicit differentiation. Yeah, we can look at that. Implicit differentiation. Yeah, and that should probably be a whole video by itself because that's relatively complicated. So that'll be next time. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.